Good afternoon. I'm going to call this meeting of the October 3rd, 2024 meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals to order. I request that the staff confirm that the Kansas Open Meetings Act required notice has been properly provided.
Yes, I can confirm that the packet was posted and the required notice was provided.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Board Member Dorsweiler. Board Member Creer.
Present.
Board Member May. Board Member Owens.
Here.
Board Member Troe.
Here.
Chair Hardy.
Here.
We have 4 members present of a 7-member board. 4 members constitutes a quorum, so we have a quorum to conduct today's business and move on with our agenda.
Thank you. First order of business is approval of minutes of the August 15, 2024 regular meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? Are there any changes that need to be made? So I'll.
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the minutes as written.
We have a motion, second?
Second.
And we have a second. All in favor, or discussion?
Aye.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. The minutes have been approved. Under new business, we have application number V24-5. We'll have the staff report at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an application filed by Mr. Kevin Newell, and he's requesting a maximum storage building size variance of 240 square feet from 360 square feet, which is the maximum allowed in a residential district, to 600 square feet to allow a 24 by 25 foot rear yard structure. And our location is in the Golden Eagle Estates, edition number 4. And the address is 2216 Deven Place. And Mr. Michelson is the planner who worked with the applicant on this case, so I'm going to have him present you with that information.
Thank you, Dean. So the property that's subject of this variance request is located in the Golden Eagle Estates, edition number 4 subdivision, located north of East Magnolia Road and east of Huntington Road. In June of 2024, the applicant, Kevin Newell, applied for a building permit to erect a 25 by 24 foot workshop / shed in his backyard with a total square footage of 600 square feet. As staff reviewed the application, we determined that the proposed building was a storage shed and that the proposed storage shed exceeded the maximum size allowed of 360 square feet under section 4258 of the zoning ordinance. Staff sent the applicant a plan review letter and gave him a couple of options of either reducing the size of the proposed shed to below 360 square feet or applying for a maximum storage shed size variance. The nature of the current request, the applicant has filed an application for a variance to the 360 square foot shed size limit. And his proposal is to erect an accessory building with a total area of 600 square feet in his backyard to serve as a workshop and a storage shed, which also includes a portion of the building that is unenclosed to serve as a porch or patio overhang. The applicant states that the additional size is needed to provide workspace for his woodworking projects and tool storage needs, for which the proposed workshop, the enclosed portion, would provide that space. The proposed design of the structure consists of a 16-foot by 25-foot portion that is enclosed, so that's 400 square feet, and an additional 8-foot by 25-foot attached open porch, which is 200 square feet. So that's what comprises the total of the 600 square feet. The overall size of the proposed structure is 240 square feet, or 66% larger than the maximum size allowed in the city's accessory building regulations, and with the enclosed portion being 40 square feet, or 11% larger than the maximum size allowed for a shed of that 360 square feet. As justification for the maximum shed size variance, the applicant states that is a regularly shaped lot, a corner lot, and existing easements limit the potential locations for an accessory structure, and that it's not feasible to construct a driveway to access a rear yard garage if it were proposed as a garage versus a shed. He also states that due to the unique design of the structure and that only a portion of it would be enclosed, it would not appear out of character with the neighborhood and adjacent properties. So Section 4258 of the zoning ordinance says that permitted accessory uses include but are not limited to the following, which would be a storage building or structure incidental to a permitted use, provided that no structure that is accessory to a residential dwelling shall exceed 360 square feet, and a detached garage or carport up to 770 square feet. So residential properties can have one of each of those, can have a shed up to 360 square feet and a detached garage up to 770 square feet. For the surrounding land use and zoning around the applicant's property, it's all surrounded by single-family dwellings, and the zoning adjacent to that in all directions it's all within a PDD with R zoning, or single-family residential zoning. For the 5 criteria that we use for the analysis that you're considering for the variance, we'll start with uniqueness. And the need for the variance must be caused by a condition which is unique to the property in question and not shared by other properties in the area. So some examples would be undersized lots, uniquely shaped lots, unusual slopes or topography, need to protect existing improvements or trees or easements, or unusually large street right-of-ways. The need for a storage shed size variance is supposed to be related to unique characteristics that relate specifically to the applicant's property and are not shared by other properties in the area and were not created by the actions of the property owner themselves. So the applicant states that the lot is an irregularly shaped lot with 2 front yards, and it also has a 10-foot wide utility easement along the entire south side of the lot and existing underground utility lines across the southeast portion. You want to go to the site plan? Has existing underground utility lines across the southeast portion of the lot, so down along here. So all of that limits the usable area for detached accessory structure. If a detached garage were proposed, it would also require a driveway connection to an existing street, and that would, on this lot, result in an over 100-foot length of driveway that would be required to get back to the proposed location of the storage shed. And it would cover about 75% of the side yard along that side of the property. So staff would agree that the applicant's lot is uniquely shaped and contains platted easements that limit the availability of locations for accessory structures. This is lot 28. So lot 28's shape, it's 7-sided, relatively pie-shaped corner lot, and it's about 17,047 square feet. And it has street frontage along Deven Place, which is a short cul-de-sac to the north, and Red Hawk Lane, residential local street to the east, which means that there's a 30-foot building setback for the required front yards along each of those frontages. And accessory structures cannot be located in the front yards, so that's pertinent to this, to the locations that are available for the accessory structures. The property abuts 3 adjacent properties along the south property lines, all of which have a 10-foot drainage and utility easement along the entire length. And in total, the easement and required front yard areas would prohibit the construction of any structures, and that comprises about 42% of the total lot area. The existing underground gas and utility lines connected to the dwelling from the south property lines would likely prohibit locating any structures in the south side yard further east on the property. Staff would agree that the applicant's statement that if this project were pursued as a detached garage, the required driveway surface would be in excess of 100 feet and would consume a large portion of the west side yard. For number 2, no adverse effect on neighbors. A variance must not cause any adverse effect on the neighboring properties. Some examples of that would be restricting the flow of air or blocking light, causing increased drainage or runoff problems for neighbors, detracting from the appearance of the neighborhood, reducing the property values of neighbors, and increasing the risk of fire spread. So the applicant states that the location of the proposed workshop has been discussed with adjacent property owners to the west and the south, who are not opposed to the project or its location. Other adjacent properties along the rear property lines also have accessory structures in the rear yards and or privacy fences. And the proposed workshop would have a total area of 600 square feet, which is less than the 770 square feet allowed for a detached garage, and would be less visually intrusive than a garage in the same location. The location of the workshop would not interfere with the access to existing easements and would not increase drainage or runoff for the neighbors. Staff would agree that the proposed workshop appears to be designed and located in a manner that would not have adverse effects on the neighboring properties. And the proposed workshop would be located in the southwest portion of the rear yard here. And it's nearest the adjacent properties that have privacy fences or accessory structures in their yards as well. To staff, this would appear to support the applicant's statement that the proposed workshop would not detract from the appearance of the neighborhood or reduce the property values of the neighbors. For number 3, unnecessary hardship, the applicant must show that not granting the variance will cause an unnecessary hardship by denying reasonable or beneficial use of the property. And this requires more than a showing of personal inconvenience or increased cost. The applicant states that the proposed structure would have a total footprint of 600 square feet, with 400 square feet of that being enclosed and 200 being an unenclosed covered porch along the east side of the building. And due to the unique shape of the property and the limited locations to place a structure, the design has a dual function as a workshop and a shade structure, resulting in a more efficient use of the space on the property. There's no intent to use the structure for vehicular storage, so if this project were proposed as a detached garage, the requirement to build a driveway would make the project cost prohibitively expensive and would be unnecessary for the intended use of the building. Staff would agree that based on the uniqueness of the lot and the limited places for accessory structures, their options would be limited if the variance were not approved. And staff would also agree that the design of the proposed structure does appear to be intended to make efficient use of the limited buildable area within the rear yard. If the enclosed portion of the workshop were proposed without the covered porch, being just a total of 400 square feet, it would likely qualify for an administrative variance, which could be approved at the discretion of the zoning administrator, since it would only be 11% greater in size than the zoning regulations allow. This would mean that the owner could potentially build that structure by itself and then build an additional freestanding shade structure at some point in the future. But staff would note that in that scenario, a possible effect could be that the owner would have to work with an even more limited amount of space because there are separation requirements between each individual structure on a property. So that could constrain the buildable locations even more than it is now. So staff would agree that under the strict application of the zoning ordinance, in order for this workshop to be permissible at the proposed size without obtaining the requested variance, it would need to be built as a detached garage, which would require a driveway connection. So staff would request that the applicant provide additional information about the hardship that might result if the storage shed was reduced in size or designed without the covered porch. And staff would also request that the applicant clarify in a little bit more detail what portion of the shed would be devoted to workshop area, if any, and what portion would be devoted to storage. For number 4, effect on public health, safety, and welfare. The requested variance must not adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. And some examples would be creation of unsafe traffic conditions, encroachment in future right-of-way, or increasing the risk of fire spread or flooding. The applicant states that the proposed location is in the lot's farthest southwest corner, where its visibility is minimal. The workshop would be designed in a manner that fits the character of the existing residential dwelling and suits the required compatibility criteria for detached residential accessory structures. The proposed workshop location would not encroach into the 10-foot rear utility and drainage easement and would be 5 feet from the west property line, which would minimize the risk of fire spread. And staff would agree that the proposed workshop does not appear to create any adverse effects on the health, safety, and welfare of the public. For number 5, conformity with the general spirit and intent of the zoning ordinance. The variance must conform to the general spirit and intent of the zoning ordinance. A variance should not be granted which would undermine or defeat the purpose for which a regulation was adopted. And size restrictions on accessory buildings ensure that they are properly proportioned with the primary structure and don't exceed the allowable lot coverage, and ensure that a residential neighborhood maintains its residential character. The applicant states that the workshop portion of the structure, which is 400 square feet, is only about 11% larger than the maximum size allowed of 360 square feet. The overall size of 600 square feet for the full structure is less than the maximum size allowed for a detached garage and would have a lesser impact than if it were a full-size detached garage. Staff would agree that the proposed workshop appears to be in conformity with the general spirit and intent of the zoning ordinance, and would agree that the proposed workshop would be less visually intrusive and would result in a lesser lot coverage than if the applicant were to build a detached garage. The zoning ordinance doesn't provide regulations specifically for this scenario where you have a detached workshop with a porch attached. But if the porch were instead designed as a separate structure, it appears that it would be allowed on the property, and staff would agree that combining the workshop and the covered porch does make sense for this property. Staff would also note that the proposed storage building would cover only about 3.5% of the lot, and once you include the existing dwelling in there, the total lot coverage would be about 20%, and the maximum lot coverage allowed in the R district is 30%. So it's well within the maximum allowed lot coverage. So having sufficient physical space is not sufficient justification in and of itself for a maximum storage size variance. Although it should be a factor, there are also aesthetic factors that come into play in evaluating the possible impact on adjacent properties as well as the intended use of the building. And Section 4258 requires that the residential storage buildings be compatible with the dwelling they serve in terms of design, appearance, and materials. In order for the board to approve an oversized shed, it needs to make a finding under number 5, under that criteria number 5, that the approval of an oversized shed would not violate the spirit and intent of this ordinance, because 1, the proposed building would not be out of scale with the surrounding area, and 2, that the proposed building would maintain the residential appearance and character of the neighborhood. So the applicants submitted plans that you've seen, that we've shown up here, a site plan and elevations that give you an illustration of what the proposed building would look like. It would have a gable or a gable style that's sloped roof, and it's kind of a combination of a gambrel barn style roof and then a gable there. It would have asphalt shingles, and the roof height would be 16 feet, which is less than the existing dwelling on the property. The building would have lap siding, which is consistent with the existing dwelling and would match the color of the existing house. So to staff, it appears that the plans conform with the regulations applicable to detached storage buildings, except for the proposed size. So the question for the board to consider here is whether this is too much building for the size of the lot, the size of the house, and the surrounding neighborhood. So the board has 4 alternatives that they could consider in deciding this. The board could approve the maximum storage size building size variance as requested, with or without conditions, if the required findings of fact can be made. The board could approve a lesser variance than requested, which would be a size less than 600 square feet, with or without conditions, if the required findings of fact can be made. The board could postpone action on this application if they need additional information from the applicant or staff that is required to make a decision. And number 4, the board could deny the applicant's request if the findings of fact cannot be made. Staff would request that the applicant provide a little bit more information about the hardship that might result if he were limited to a reduced size, since that is one option that the board has. If the applicant provides information to the satisfaction of the board and the board wishes to approve this variance, then staff would recommend the following conditions of approval. Number 1, this proposed storage shed workshop will be compatible in design, material, and color with the existing house on the property. Number 2, the construction must substantially correspond to the plans as submitted to the board, subject to the terms of an issued building permit. Number 3, the storage shed building shall be used only for personal storage and personal use and not for any business purposes. And number 4, that the storage shed building is approved in lieu of a rear yard detached garage. No building permit may be issued for a rear yard detached garage on this lot in the future. However, a building permit could be issued to convert the storage shed to a detached garage in the future if the current or a future owner is able to provide sufficient vehicle access to the rear yard, which would be that driveway connection. And with that, can hand it over to the board to.
All right. Are there any questions for staff at this point? Is the applicant present? Would you please step to the podium and give us your name and address for the record, please?
Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Newell. My address is 2216 Deven Place.
All right. Would you add whatever you would like to the staff's presentation to give us a better idea of what your project is all about and how you arrived at the size, that sort of thing?
So I can show you one drawing that wasn't included in the packet as I was reading through the mail out for them asking for what part of the building would be used for storage.
You can step back to the...
Or a workshop. It will have a stairway in the back corner going up to the loft area, which will have storage on the top level, and then the bottom level will work as the front, probably 2/3 will be for workshop area and storage of lawn equipment, and then the back area will be walled off, and that will be for like finishing projects, like for a dust-free environment.
Okay, so the area over the porch then is used for storage as well, is that correct?
No, it will not, because of the gambrel style. The 16 by 25 building will basically be completely separate. The only thing that will join will be the roof.
Okay. And in terms of the size, was there ever thought of not creating an issue that you had to come before the board to?
Sure. So as was up there earlier with our overhead, so we have a rear deck on the house, which is great. Unfortunately, it's south facing, and if any of you have a south facing deck, it's pretty worthless because it doesn't, even though it's covered, it doesn't provide any shade from the sun, because the sun just moves around the deck, and the most shade you have on the deck is during the hottest part of the day, and that's the time you're not on the deck. So having an east-facing covered porch area would allow some more shade and a place to get some reprieve from the heat if we wanted to sit out and spend some time outside.
And in terms of the size of the shop itself, how did you consider that size-wise?
I've had a building before in the past, and a 360 square foot building would be adequate. But right now we have a 3-car garage and we're using 1-car lot because we have so much lawn equipment and storage and stuff, and our oldest daughter's getting ready to drive, and I've parked my vehicle out there about since we've had the house, and I have no issues, but it would be great to have a little more storage and not have to move everything around when I want to use it as a workshop. So it is only 11% bigger. If I had to make changes, I would probably lose the shaded porch, which I really don't want to do. But as I said, I thought 2 months ago, which I could have started on the project 2 months ago, if I had just taken the porch off, because in talking with the committee who are the building section, they were very helpful with suggestions and ideas. I could have went with an 11% overage and just done the building at that time. I heard one comment was that, well, you want to make it a big garage and you'll just cover in the walls of the covered porch later. Well, that's not really an option because the slabs, it's 2 separate slabs because you got the main building with the required footings, and then the porch is going to be a sloped porch for rain runoff. So you're going to have a drop if you decided to take that out, and the outside wall is load bearing anyways. So there's really not an intent there to cover it into a large garage or a garage type building. Like I said, it's just in a shade structure we'd like to have. We've debated on what we'd like to do to have some sitting areas for people over and company, and if we have to do a driveway all the way back, that basically makes the west side unusable for anything like that, and then you would still have to put a covered structure on top for shade. So we just thought, as they mentioned, the best way to do it would be to try to combine those.
Other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess the way we often look at this as staff, and just to reemphasize that if you're looking at visual impact and 600 square feet, you can look at it from the standpoint that you could put a 770 square foot garage in the same place without coming here, and so staff is looking at this as this is kind of being done in lieu of having a detached garage, and net effect would actually be less than a garage that could go in the same location. So
Thank you for that addition. All right, we'll bring the discussion back to the board for further discussion or possible action.
Yes, if there's no discussion, I'd make a motion to approve the variance.
Okay, we have a motion to approve application number V24-5. Is there a second?
Is this with 4 recommendations they have on here, or without them?
I would say yes with the,
All right, we'll amend that motion to include the 4 recommendations by staff.
motion
I'll
to
second.
approve with 4 conditions.
Let's just, okay.
Yeah, I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the application with the 4 staff recommendations. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Ready to move on? Okay. We have one additional administrative item. We have our annual business meeting and election of officers.
So we're now rolled into October, but September is generally the time where each of our boards and commissions have a annual meeting, and it's a time for the election of officers. And so at the time that our packet was created, we had 7 appointed members, 4 of whom are present today. And one of the makeups of the Board of Zoning Appeals is a Planning Commission representative, and past 2 years that representative has been Carla Waters, and Carrie Paget has been appointed by the mayor to take Carla's place as representative on the board. And so there are no vacancies on the board, except for we do not currently have a youth member. And so our task as part of the annual meeting is to consider the election of a board chair and vice chair for the coming year. And Randall Hardy served as the board chair this past year and is eligible for a second term as chair. Justin Owens served as a vice chair last year, and he is eligible for re-election or for election to the position of chair. All current members are eligible for the position of chair and vice chair. And so there is nothing in the bylaws that precludes the nomination or election of the Planning Commission representative as an officer, but the Planning Commission representative is not present this afternoon. So our 2 action items are to elect a chair and vice chair. And so at this time, I would open the floor for nominations to serve as the board's chair for the coming year.
A question about my term ending in February of next year.
I think we're going to get that fixed so that it automatically extends to August. That was kind of a error that was done, since all terms are supposed to terminate in August, and so there was a error in your appointment resolution, but I think we'll get that corrected so that your term will run through August 31st. But as I said, everyone who's here is eligible to serve as chair, vice chair, and everyone here is eligible to nominate a name to serve as chair or vice chair. So is there a name that someone would like to nominate to be the chair?
Nomination for Chair Hardy to continue as chair of the board.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second nominating Randall Hardy as chair for the upcoming year. Are there any further nominations from the floor? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of Randall Hardy being the board chair for the upcoming year, please say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes. I will now open the floor for nominations for an individual to serve as vice chair for the upcoming year.
I'll make a motion that Justin Owen continues as vice chairman.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second nominating Justin Owens to continue in the role of vice chair. Are there any further nominations for vice chair? Seeing none, I will call the question on the position of vice chair. All those in favor of Justin Owens serving, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, you have fulfilled your duty as electing new officers who are the same officers for the coming year.
You did such a good job.
What you just saw was that railroad going by.
Yeah, right. All right, thank you. Do we have any unfinished or other business tonight?
I'm not aware of any unfinished or other business, other than just to remind everybody that Daisy is your go-to person in terms of communication, and so we're working with people on Mr. Newell on applications and schedules. So if you know in advance that you're unable to attend a meeting, and we know soon enough, we can adjust the schedule accordingly. So any time in advance that you know that you're not able to attend, it's really important. If all things being equal, we can have a quorum, and if we simply can't, then we can readjust the schedule. But because this is a special meeting held on the 3rd, we will have a regularly scheduled meeting the 3rd Thursday, the 17th, and we have 2 applications filed for the 17th, and we'll have a meeting on that date. So if you have a vacation or scheduling conflict or medical appointment or something of that nature, please let Daisy know so we can work on getting a quorum for the 17th.
Very good. Is there anyone present for a public forum?
I would note for the record that there is no one from the public online, nor is there anyone in the room for public comment.
Okay, thank you. If we have no further business, then the meeting's adjourned.